talking about marketplace mission in a taint economy. And so I just want to say that this session today is sponsored by the Marketplace Mission cohort of the V3 movement. So the V3 movement is a church planting movement, and we have church planting cohorts. And so we are really excited to have the leader of our Marketplace planting cohort, which recently launched in, I guess we're in year 2 with Hugh Halter at the helm of that as the lead coach. And so we're really excited. That program starts mid-August and goes through mid-December and continues mid-January through mid-May. And it's a really great way to lean into church planting, but incorporating a marketplace component. So he's got a ton of experience in that, which we'll get a chance to hear about today. So we're really excited to be with you. So as we get started, I just want to let us to ground us in today's subject. Right now, the church is changing in ways that we can see and feel, but it's also changing in ways that we can't. And these changes are systemic. Most are only looking at changes that are happening above the surface, but you know, we can deliver our sermons through Zoomcast, and we can the question is, how do we equip our existing small groups to do better when it comes to engaging the neighborhoods, and how do we do that? How do we get the government loans so that we can keep everyone on staff? Are there sustainability ideas and questions that we need to consider? And what if the church was actually a completely free venture where it wasn't dependent specifically on tithes and offering as for sustainability? What is it that we can know now? And now that we have this extra free time in some cases due to the COVID-19 crisis. So to guide us through this conversation, we have Hugh Halter and Taylor McCall to guide our time. They're both practitioners in kingdom in kingdom investment, and specifically doing church as a kingdom ecosystem made up of both business and neighborhood communities. And so in this webinar, we're going to focus on how to discern what God is doing when your business plans are so integrated with ministry plans, and how to ride that even when the market drops, what to focus on during downtime, and how creativity increases during testing, and how do we press into that. We have such a great discipleship opportunity in front of us, and we'll get a chance to explore that. So to give a little bit of background for our guest and for our friends, Hugh Halter moved to Alton, Illinois back a couple years ago, and they moved not knowing what they would do, but they discerned that God was calling them to a small town, and within a year they owned a 12,000 square foot federal post office. And so we'll get a chance to hear a little bit more about what they've done with that space and how they're using it to birth small ventures and specifically have an impact within the community. He also has written numerous acclaimed books like The Tangible Kingdom, Flesh Bivo, and Sacrilege. And so he's also the founder of Missio Publishing. So we're really glad that he's here, especially also as a coach and the creator of the V3 Movement's Marketplace Planting cohort. Taylor McCall is the founder of Common Thread, and that's a movement of interconnected churches in Birmingham, Alabama, that consists of intentional neighborhood communities, small businesses, and justice works, both within the city and multiple cities around the world. So he and his wife and their 5 children are living in downtown Birmingham, and they have been living in and practicing intentional community for almost a decade. And then, of course, we've got J.R. Woodward, he's the author of Creating a Missional Culture, the Church's Movement. He's also the national director of the V3 Church Planting Movement and the co-founder of the Praxis Gathering. And so we're glad to have him today. And I'm Lori Ruffin, the operations manager with the V3 Movement and the founder of the COO team, which is also a operations agency serving nonprofits and small businesses. And so we're really glad to have you here for today's conversation. As we go along, there may be questions that come to mind or ideas and concepts that you want more clarity on or want to process further. So I want to encourage you to drop into, there's a Q&A section in Zoom where you can write your question. And at the end of our time, we'll have a chance to take as many questions as we can. So with that, I'll pass it to you all.
Well, hey there. Hugh Halter here. Glad to be with you. I am sitting next to Taylor. Probably looks a little bit weird, but I'll let him tell his story. But they've moved up to our town for a little season here while they're still overseeing a lot of what's happening in Birmingham. But glad to be here. Lori, thanks for the intro. And JR, great to see you pandemicking in Kona, wherever you're at. Is it Kona? It's somewhere in the Hawaiis. I know that. So it's okay.
He's muted.
You're muted, but it's okay, JR. We figured it out.
It's yeah, it's Oahu Island. Yeah.
Well, that's still okay. So we'll get to what you're doing later. But JR invited us into B3 last year. We did start the MarketPlace cohort, and really had a great time. And I don't know if we'll have time to invite you guys to check that out later, but we are going to go round 2 on that. And I think Lori mentioned it starts back up in August. Very limited spots. I think we only do up to 12. Maybe we'll do 2 classes if there's enough interest. But if you are thinking about different ecclesial forms, but you want to come from more of a marketplace business aspect, then we'd love to have you jump into that. So kind of what I'm going to do is frame the day a little bit, not the day, just the hour. But I know some of you, I saw some of your names coming across, a lot of people that I've interacted with. So most of you know our story through the Tangible Kingdom, which was really a network of missional communities. And then we moved out to Alton about almost 5 years ago, not specifically to do, exactly a Tangible Kingdom story, but we knew that God had called us here. We knew we would live the same way. So sometimes when people ask me, what we have intentionally decided to do differently in this town than Denver, well, we said at a life level and a missional community as a base of operation, probably nothing different there. But what emerged was in our town, very, very poor town, pretty racially mixed, just 20 minutes north of St. Louis. We just recognized, in fact, when we would drive through, it was mostly we noticed a lot of boarded up buildings and really beautiful buildings. And so we started to sniff around for the story of this town and just realized that it really was hurting financially. It lost about 2/3 of its population. It's right on the Mississippi River. So I hear there back in the 1920s, there were more millionaires in Alton than anywhere in the country. And then they just started to lose a lot of their industry. So when we came in, we bought a house. My 2 adult daughters and their brand new husbands joined us. So we were a mission, kind of a family on mission of 6 of us. And kids, we all lived right downtown and just kind of started to walk around. And the prayer was like, Lord, we'll do whatever. And very quickly, this building was donated to us by a gentleman that I didn't really know that well at all. And we got the family and just began to walk around and went, okay, what would be good news to this town? And we realized a little bit of a business incubator encouragement, kind of like apostolic center, we thought it would fit the bill. So there wasn't really a place to get coffee. There was no breakfast or daytime space. Usually in cities, daytime space is where the creative juices flow, right? It's where people are working or having meetings, a lot of bars and stuff like that at night, but nothing during the daytime. So we kind of put our hand to the plow for about a year and just renovated the space. And we had to raise quite a bit of money. So even though we're going to talk about church as a completely free venture, business is not. So when you're thinking about marketplace mission, it's not that, we're going to do money differently. You still need money, but we're going to use it differently. We're going to use it to create enterprise that not only employs people, but blesses the city and allows us a freedom not to have to worry about getting butts in the seats on a Sunday. So it just frees you up completely. But so that's what we did. We started Post Commons, which is the public brand, because everybody knew this building is the Post. So we just said it's going to be the Commons. We are kitty corner across the way from City Hall. We're right at the center of downtown. So everybody knows about this space. It had been boarded up for 60 years. So when we opened, it was every newspaper in town was writing stories. We actually had to ask them to stop writing stories about us because it was getting awkward with the locals. but we were like the show. It's where everybody came to hang out, and really good coffee all day, brunch cafe till about 4 p.m. And then it emerged as like the premier event center. So we, before the pandemic, we were booked out starting in the middle of April. We had a wedding booked here every week till the end of the year. So we've become kind of, even in St. Louis, people know about our spot. But we can get about 500 people in the building. In the coffee area, we can probably seat about 150 people. And so there's just lots of space. The basement we still haven't even used yet. It's set up as more of a shared office space concept, or shared workers space, that we're just about to hopefully open. But that sort of became what we would call the apostolic base of operation. It's where we met everybody. It's where everybody heard about our story. And then, over the last year and a half, 2 years, a small community of believers, some that we hired, some that just found us, that were kind of done with church, started to realize that we were doing stuff a little differently. We began a kind of like a missionary community, almost like you would a core group of a church plant. And we call it side door community because we asked people to come in the side door. We didn't want to do anything public through the front door. We didn't want to actually have a name of a church or invite other Christians from any local church here. We wanted to just reach people that were completely outside, or serve people. And so, we do have a side door community. It's about 40 people. And that's, just like it was back in the tangible kingdom days, but this one's a little bit more robust community. Everybody that's with us here is either working in our business network, or they have found us along the way and are pretty deeply integrated in what we do with the needs of the city. And again, we're not a large group, so we're not killing it, but I think I was going through our group the other night, and we have almost everybody that's integrated in some specific need of people in recovery or in poverty. And so anyway, we just feel really good about it, but it's a very small start. And then, the sort of the nonprofit is called the Lantern Network. And we don't ever really talk about that. Most people in the public don't even know that exists, but that nonprofit works alongside the business side of what we do, and it allows us to take in donations, obviously, to fix up the building. I think we had to raise a little bit over $600,000 to renovate the space. And then we basically operate as an incubator for good work. So our nonprofit purpose is to incubate good works. Good work could be a missional community in a neighborhood. It could be helping a young gal that wants to start a bakery, which happened in our building, to incubate her bakery. She's an atheist. So, we don't just incubate Christian good things. Anybody that wants to help start anything that would help their own lives or help people, we try to help them. And people know that. They can come to us, and somehow they will get an hour with us to just have a little intro coaching. And then if we can let them use our building or our space or our money, whatever we have, we try to give it to help people do stuff. So so that's kind of, I guess, a framework. Lori, JR, is that a decent backdrop to what we're doing? But
yes, fantastic.
Church is forming from all this, and we do a lot of work, and the Jesus stuff is subversive, but very observable by the city and by people around us, and cool stuff happens.
What's next? Is that my cue?
I don't know.
Taylor, yeah, I think Taylor, if you can share your story with us.
Yeah, one thing I'd love to say, just to kind of point out in that story, Hugh mentioned that the lantern is fairly unknown, which is a high priority for some of the story that we're trying to articulate and influence. Kind of a memorable phrase that I feel like came from the heart of God to me and to us years ago was we want to form organizations that fuel movement as opposed to the juxtaposed thought movements that kind of fuel organization, which I feel like is the prominent narrative that's been put forth in our faith movement for a long time now is we try to create movements that really push our organizations to the top. But as we decentralize our organizations, we in essence spread out our movements, and it becomes the engine for the movement. Anyway, that was just important to point out. My name is Taylor McCall. I am from Birmingham, Alabama. I want to give a shout out to some Alabama people on here. I don't know you, but I saw Madison and Huntsville.
I thought everybody in Alabama knows.
Yeah, we actually are probably related. So what's up, cousins, and everyone else? Good to see you. My story, we live in Alton now. So 4 months ago, me and my wife and our 5 children moved up to Alton. And we're here indefinitely for many reasons. So mostly just to paint houses and learn how to work a paint sprayer from this man. No, it's been a good time, but 2 months in, the pandemic hit. So it has also been very interesting. But Birmingham is my home and where my faith community resides. And I guess I'll start briefly from the origins. Was trained in ministry, started doing full-time ministry, I think age 21 maybe, and did that for almost 13 years. And probably 10 years in, my wife and I started having conversations, deep, vulnerable conversations about God's heart for the church, and so many things that I'm sure many of you are doing and have been doing for years now, and movement and what's wrong, what feels lacking in our own hearts. And in 2011, we began to form an organization called Common Thread that, similar to the Lantern, is not really a known entity by many in the Birmingham area, but it became more of an engine for the movement. And the whole heartbeat behind it was we wanted the first, second, and third spaces that we do our lives in, which are the home, the market space, and the social space. We wanted them to be fully infiltrated by the ecclesia, by the church, by the movement and the kingdom of God. And how that was going to take place, we weren't sure at the time. We didn't have a lot of tangible and tactical influences, but we were having conversations with different people around the country, and we're trying to follow God as best we could. So fast forward, I don't know, we'll go halfway through, 5 years later, 2016, we had moved away from, in 2011, we had moved away. So we quit our jobs. We moved to downtown Birmingham. We began to live in close proximity with a couple other families that we wanted to do life with, and we wanted to commune with Jesus with in the evenings, and when kids went to bed, and on the weekends, and for parties and block parties and time together and whatnot. We wanted to know our neighbors together. We knew that having young children, that was going to create a hindrance of true life together. So we knew we needed to live closely. We kind of determined this idea of let's live within baby monitor distance so that we could be in each other's homes and be connected to each other's lives naturally and rhythmically.
So I thought you said that you did that so you could leave your kids and go drink whiskey and still be able to hear them if they were crying.
I will plead the fifth on whether or not we left our kids in our homes while we walked over to our neighbors. I'm not going to either admit to that or deny it. And yeah, through that, we saw the market space as another extremely important space to get the movement of a church into. So having an entrepreneurial spirit, we began to launch different businesses. In 2013, we launched a coffee company called Seeds Coffee, specialty coffee company in Birmingham. It's an LLC, a roastery, coffee shop, well known throughout the South. And we've done really well with that. And from there, we began to launch several other kind of interconnected market spaces, 17 in total over the past 8 years. And most of them are in Birmingham. A few of them are in other cities of communities that we've partnered with. And from there, we spread out throughout the city. We call our kind of faith hubs, we call them hub communities, where we do life together. We walk, we struggle, we seek God, we know our neighbors, we know the area, we try to understand the needs, we try to be a blessing to the community and to the streets. We try to fulfill the call of the kingdom, to be the repairers of the breach, to be the ones, the fulfillment of the scripture where the righteous thrive, the city prospers. So all that to say, here we are in 2020. We have 6 hub communities in Birmingham with somewhere between maybe, 35 and 65 people in each of the hub communities. We have various justice work that happens in the social space of Birmingham, whether it's in the athletic space or in among the fatherless, or with single mothers, or with teenagers who are being trafficked. Mentoring, any of the social spaces, job creation, job skills training, education. We have a large education movement that we started probably 5 years in, because we saw what was so significantly lacking in the kind of poverty community in Birmingham in regard to education. But all that came from just living and understanding the needs of the communities that we were in. And that's what we call church, is the people of God on mission together, living life, creating, ideating, dreaming. The scripture says that when the Lord brought back the captives of Zion, we were like those who dream. And our mouths were filled with laughter and our tongues with shouts of joy. So we felt like when Zion is restored, or the kingdom, when the kingdom is restored on earth, we can dream again and we can create again. And we're not bound by these barriers that tell us we can't. And we have to, it's more about the organization than it is about the movement. And that's been our road for the past decade.
Thanks for sharing
That's
your
great.
story.
Yeah,
Jay, I
yeah.
think you had some questions.
Yeah. Thanks again. Yeah, I think not just, I think for venturing out into this way and finding ways to, as Hugh talked about, use money to employ people and bless the community, and just, and as you talked about, Taylor, just being that common thread in all of the significant spaces of life, all the spheres of life, wanting to see the kingdom become a reality. So I appreciate you guys pioneering in that. My first question, I do have a few questions, but the first one is just kind of in our current times. You both have started some businesses. How has COVID-19 affected that? Your mission of trying to bless people by employing them and blessing the community. What's been the hits that you've had?
Why don't you go first and go Birmingham?
Well, I think our responses might be a bit different, because our communities I mean, this is my community here now. Alton is where I'm doing life, but I'm in connection with our Birmingham leaders almost daily. And we have a pretty decentralized, kind of spread out community that are all interconnected, hence the name Common Thread. That's the whole idea. And I guess I would say two things. One, just on a logistical level, we have been blessed and thankful for some of the support from the government. Surprisingly, you know, we run only small businesses, some of them very small, 1 to 2 employees. Some of them, probably the largest is maybe 17 employees. But also on a more kind of accurate or applicable note to your question, this time has been really significant for our community because if I could just share this image, one of the words God gave us early on was when Jesus was talking to his disciples in Matthew 25. I don't know if everybody's familiar with this, but he says when the rocks begin to fall, or when you know, the time is ending, the tribulation is coming, head for the mountains. And we think he's talking about Petra, and specifically, I think he's probably talking about the church. He's telling people the church is going to be this place of safety and of harbor, of justice. So I have this whole thought and idea that I want to be able to articulate over time, of how we're not really called to change the world, but we're more so called to build the kingdom. And the kingdom is what shifts the thinking, is what shifts injustice to justice, is what welcomes, what levels the playing field for the poor and the broken and the outcast and the marginalized. Here's my point in all that, if we want to go into it more later, we can, is that the community as a whole has kind of come around and said, where are the needs? Which businesses are hurting worse than others? For instance, our landscaping company and our construction company have taken off in the pandemic. Everybody's wanting their yards and their backyards and all the problems in their homes renovated and remodeled. People are getting these stimulus checks and they're wanting to invest in something. And whereas our coffee company has really struggled greatly because they're not considered a necessary entity to be running. And it's a gathering space, so we've had to shut down our lobby, and we've only relied on wholesale and drive-through, which we don't have a drive-through, so it hasn't really worked. So there's been this kind of coming around together and saying, look, we're one movement. We're all working for the same city, the city of the kingdom. So who's struggling, who's hurting, who didn't get the SBA loan or the unemployment or the stimulus, and people are committing certain amounts of their stimulus checks that don't need it. And not just for people within the church, of course, that's valuable, Galatians 6, but also for the poor and the marginalized as well, constantly asking these questions. So this time's been really interesting because I thought for a long time, what is it going to be like when the economy, like what if the economy did fall apart? What if business just wasn't a thing anymore? And this definitely is not that, but it's a glimpse of this. This could be a real thing. We never envisioned any of this. I'm sure none of us did.
But you're all of those businesses, most of them, all the money dumps into one administrative hub, correct? Mm-hmm. And you've kind of been sharing amidst the businesses. So
yeah, there is a bit of a separation. Like each business has a director that oversees all of its admin and finances and payroll, and everything runs as their own EIN, their own LLC, but they operate under a nonprofit umbrella. And so resources can be shared anytime that desire is there.
So it sounds a lot like a little bit of Acts 2 as it relates to business entities as opposed to just people. So that's cool. Hugh, what about you? What are the hits that you've had that COVID has hit your business? Because you're obviously more social space there where.
Now we lose, because we had weddings booked here every week. We technically every weekend that goes by that we're not doing a wedding, we're losing about 10 grand on that plus the coffee sales. So yeah, everything's shut down right now. But again, it's kind of working out because, you know, we had some money in the savings of the business. So we figured we could probably, even if we didn't get any help from the government, we figured we could probably go 6 to 9 months and then just reopen, which is a bummer if you are completely money driven. But again, because this is a kingdom mission, you know, the mentality was as long as we can reopen and just keep all of our staff going, because the staff are family for us, then we're okay. We're bummed that maybe we lose some of our nest eggs, so to speak. But now if, let's say this thing went 2 to 3 years, then yeah, we probably shut the biz down or get it down to 2 or 3 employees again and then try to restart, so to speak. But right now, all of our team are fine. We're going to open up in about 2 weeks for curbside. We won't probably be able to do any weddings, maybe into July, maybe August. But it looks like we will be fine. We'll come back and be able to open up, you know, as soon as we can. So
let me ask you this. Obviously, right now we have like over 3.7 million people who have COVID around the globe. There is 265,000 deaths. In the US, we're already kind of at 1.2 million confirmed cases, and we're closing in on 75,000 deaths already. The projections between now and June by a lot of people is we'll still have like 3,000 deaths a day. So while we have the tension of and the desire to reopen businesses in smart ways, we are far from, by any epidemiologists, from getting over this. In fact, you know, there's a great concern that as things start to reopen, that we're going to see even more dramatic negative results. That, by the way, are disproportionate to the Black and brown community. And so my question, I guess, is there's you guys probably, one of the best read probably articles was where Andy Crouch popularized a metaphor by the epidemiologist Michael Olshaker, where basically he felt like, you know, are we experiencing a blizzard? Is this more like a winter, or is it more like a mini ice age as far as how it will disrupt our life as we have known it? And so I think that if barring a vaccine, because right now we are unable to test as widespread as people will say we need to there's only a few ways to flatten the curve. There's a social distancing, which includes everything from hand washing to wearing protective gear to, you know, actual distance. There is the testing, widespread testing, and then there's the tracing of people who are testing. So we're not nearly where we need to be in the widespread testing at any level. Most governors are still waiting for help in that regard. I've seen, you know, Washington State, where my residence is, I think the governor there has a really, really solid plan on what it means to reopen. There's 6 different indicators that have many different elements that indicate when they open. But all this to say, if I tend to be an optimist, you know, and I love kind of the story of Acts 2, what you guys are doing with the businesses. I find it a little bit more helpful to be a realist in the pandemic thing. And obviously, I think we hope for the best, but we also plan for the worst. So if we are in fact hitting more of a mini ice age in effect, maybe the best hope for a vaccine right now comes from Oxford, but they're not looking to do human tests till September. And they're still probably a year away potentially, unless things somehow, it's too hard that you could short-sighted to rush the process too much. But I think we're in it for a little bit longer time. Some economists say that we may likely hit a depression. so I'm just kind of, how are you guys viewing that? How are you looking at, with that realistic view, how are you as a business owner who wants to use money to employ people and bless the community dealing with that and preparing for that?
Let me throw this out too, because Taylor didn't mention much about this, but within his network and even how we think about like taking our own compensation from our own businesses, and what we're seeing in a few other places around the globe where they're actually creating like literally a city of businesses and, you know, stuff, you will find that the leadership tend to have a downwardly mobile sense about their own finances. So where in Denver, Colorado, I might have needed 10 grand a month to live, Cheryl and I continually try to just downsize and live to where maybe we only need 4,000 a month. I think the McCalls had 5 kids, and now they're caring for a 16-year-old single mom and a baby. You know, they live on less than that. And their entire network in Birmingham, there's an ethos inside their own little kingdom city that we're not in it to make 80, 120 grand. We're a lot of businesses where they're set up on that type of a, you know, compensation level. Yeah, most are not going to make it through the ice age, right? But when you set that kind of Acts 2, Acts 5 type of mentality, there has to be a downwardly mobile ethos in your network, I think, to sustain. Not just, you know, because we pass it on. I still don't take any money from the network here. And so when this is going down, somebody in my CrossFit gym asked if they know any house painters, and everybody points into me. So Taylor and I went out last week and painted a house. Did 2 other bids, one today, I'll do another one tomorrow. So in some sense, you know, I told people, you know, like those of us that have been living kind of maybe at the front edge of the missionary way or the incarnational way, this is like you're like a corona cockroach. You've learned how to crawl around in the rubble, so to speak. It's harder for those that are, you know, they're used to 90 grand being a worship leader at church and go, okay, so you want us to start a business?
And not just on a personal level, as on an organizational level as well. So just for reference sake, our organization in Birmingham that employs quite a bit of people, we rely on about 5% of donated funds to run our org. So in 2019, we gave away close to 95% of our donated funds because we've created an ecosystem that kind of generates and moves itself in a sense. Now, what you're saying, JR, is pertinent because now we got this economical thing that's not just affecting donors, but it's also affecting revenue. And the one thing that I would say is there's not this kind of silver bullet response, because there are certain commitments that I don't believe are arbitrary or subjective. I actually believe Jesus taught us a commitment to simplicity. I do think that simplicity is gray, and we have to determine based on culture, you know, children, geography, all those things. What does simplicity look like for you? But if there's not a commitment to some level of simplicity, then I think you will consistently hit the exact same ceiling every time. And here's the thing: a commitment to simplicity is not a commitment to lack or to poverty or anything like that, because I could right now show you 5 different text messages from people in Birmingham that reached out to me in Illinois saying, hey, do you have this thing in Birmingham still? Because they know some of our stuff is there. Or do you know anybody where I can find this? And there's just kind of this sharing and this, we don't need 112 chainsaws. We don't need every single person to drive a diesel truck. We don't need, there's a sharing that happens that's really started to become fluid throughout the community, where there is an ability to commit to simplicity. because not everyone needs a sewing machine or a plane, or, you know what I'm saying? Like whatever tool or object or trip. Not everyone needs to own a lake house. Not everyone needs a place at the beach, because when a couple people have it, they share it. And then everyone can kind of commit to simplicity. And that's not easily done, but it is possible.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, both the simplicity, the looking out for each other as a community of businesses, it's very unique. And as you guys mentioned, as leaders, willing to take the first hit, willing to decrease. I think all of those are beautiful kingdom principles. I'm maybe just one last question, and then Lori has some questions from people. So I guess I like all of that. Like, how, if this is kind of a longer term thing, is there other elements that are kind of influencing how you think about the future? Is it from a marketplace missionary perspective?
Well, let me just a couple of thoughts, because this whole thing is guised in the umbrella that we are to be building God's church, right? So this isn't just hey, how do you start a coffee shop? This is, if the coffee shop even had to be closed for 3 years, would that affect the ecclesial movement? I think it would strengthen it. So far, we're seeing that the longer we're in struggle, the more our community seems to be thriving. And I think you will find that because we're set up, again, like a network. So what it means is we just have like this big, huge building. We all come in at our own time and study in here and get our work done. But I just think that the possibilities where many people in a down market would go, oh, geez, we're going to ice age for 3 years. The one benefit when you're doing a marketplace ecclesial network is that there are people that still have money, and there are people that want to make kingdom investment. And I believe that they're going to be more inspired to invest their money into, again, business startup than just throwing money back at their church to see if they can keep a Sunday church gathering going again. And so obviously when the market is down, that's when you buy. So I think there's huge potential, not just to tuck tail and run till this thing is over, but to find people that go, yeah, our town actually is struggling more now, but there still is resource out there. People are holding on to it right now. I think that the local church experience might be the last investment people are going to want to make, because they're going to want to help people. And I think that that's the opportunity for the church. And that, something Taylor and I are working on right now is really to set up a national network, free market church, because we think the essence of church at its very nature, all the ministries of the church, we actually think are free. They don't cost a dime. To be with people and to love people and to proclaim. And what does cost is organization and business costs. And so we just go, look, the church should be able to thrive through this thing. Your business may not thrive for a while, but it's definitely not time to just shut it down and go, I guess we'll just go back to trying to keep our sermons online or something like that.
For example,
go ahead.
A simple example. To run a homeless ministry that feeds, 100 meals every weekend is extremely expensive, administratively robust, and requires a lot of direction and logistics and oversight. And praise God for those. We have one of those that are doing meals regularly in Birmingham. But to have 100 families whose tables are open to welcome in the stranger or the destitute, the hungry, and to have dinner with them, free is I think everyone understands what I mean when I say free. Yeah, it's an extra plate of beans and turkey, but what I'm saying is that's free. That doesn't cost anything. That doesn't require a staff position. That doesn't require insurance. It doesn't require insurance, which is needed when you have a large scale homeless work. Another similar story is the young lady that lives in our home now, and her 3-month-old baby, it required no real financial increase in our daily life. She's just with us. She has dinner with us and lives life with us. There was a room in our house that was perfect for them. And as our tables become larger, you might have to pay for a little more lumber to increase the size of your table. But that's what we mean when we say the ministries of the church should be free. Again, very small example, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I want Lori to kind of get some questions from I'm sure there's a number of questions. I just wanted to kind of affirm, because as you study the New Testament church, what's interesting to me is that the households were also businesses that most of the people in the household were related to. And I feel like you're, in some ways, contextualizing what was there. And when you make it more personable and more small in a sense, you kind of avoid, this grandiose approach to things that require so much more energy in different ways. So,
and if I can just say this too, JR, is there has to be a core determination or a core decision that we're not called to be baristas or house painters. Or one of our most eloquent businesses is a consulting firm called Sophia. They do internet technology, like securities, and set up large scale commercial businesses with the arm that goes up when you're driving. I mean, all kind of stuff. But Kyle, who runs Sophia, is not called to run a securities and consulting firm. He's a church planter, and he sees himself as a church planter. He sees himself as a missionary, if you will, as a movement builder. And if tomorrow Sophia could not function any longer, when you foster that entrepreneurial, evangelistic, apostolic spirit, you say, okay, well, what do we do now? We're not going into this thing because we're crazy about coffee. Yeah, coffee's great, whatever. But now it looks like we're going to need to harvest some grain or build barns or whatever, because that's what the times are calling for. And when the spirit is fostered, as opposed to some kind of I would say almost false sense of attachment to a thing, then it can be really hard in this time because your thing does not work anymore.
Yeah. Lori, what do you got for questions?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There are a ton of questions, and I guess we'll just jump in. Do you think it was imperative to have the ecclesial element set up for your community prior to the pandemic? Do you feel like that gives you an advantage, or is that can church planters or church leaders operate in this way when starting now versus prior to?
I mean, well, I think Taylor would agree. When we show up in our towns, we'd say the seat of the church is there, right? So we didn't start it ahead of time or wait for it. It just kind of grows naturally as you're leading apostolically. You're not leading as a pastor or a shepherd. You're actually creating a movement hub. And so when we were 12 people, we had movement going. People start to now be added. We actually now share our faith. Last night, I do a thing every other Wednesday called the Abbey, which is essentially a missional community of people that came into the coffee shop or the CrossFit gym. And I just walk them through stories of Jesus. And they wanted that. They asked for that. They just don't want any religious BS or recruitment into a church. Last night was the first time 2 of them actually asked, you guys keep talking about your community. One of them said, am I a part of that? And another said, how can I be a part of? And I just said, you guys are, but if you want more of the spiritual Jesus side, then we'll bring you into some other things that we do. So for us, we don't try to, and theologically, we know this is true. We can't build the church, right? Jesus said, I'll build it. What we do is we create a framework where the Holy Spirit can draw people. And then but we do have to have mechanisms to invite people into for something to grow. That could be our family, it could be our table, it can be a Sunday webinar group that we do, it could be a network of missional communities.
And in closing of that, but it's also not arbitrary, Lori, or whoever asked that. I think there's this idea, this apostolic idea of glue that I've seen all over the world of people who are apostolically gifted or apostles tend to be able to glue a community together through vision, through articulation of passionate ideas. And the basis of that is the ecclesia, is the movement of the church. Without it, I think we're just kind of mushy. We're kind of wandering, like, what are we doing? Who are we? And the truth is I say this with, a lot of kindness in my heart, but people need something to feel like they're a part of, to just tell them, oh no, we're just, seeking Jesus. No, I don't think that's helpful. I think it's really helpful for people to feel like they're a part of a movement, a part of some type of ecclesial push. And the apostolic leaders provide that. So I've always seen apostolic leaders as city builders, as formers of ecosystems, and they invite, it doesn't matter, believer, unbeliever, that's irrelevant. You're welcome into this ecosystem. The thing is, I'll close with this, is Jesus is the king of this ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So we abide by his rule and his reign. Like, we follow and submit to the things that he taught us. We actually don't completely adhere to all the ways of the other city that you came out of. And not in the sense of rebellion, though, and more of the sense of betterment and blessing.
But you will notice, so in Common Thread or Lantern Network here in Alton, we don't have like what you would call church names. We have something that they can identify with that actually sounds more like a family or a network, right? And that is for a purpose. Again, we want minimal things that we would say, hey, come join our thing, but we want them to know that they are a part of something that is growing and that has a purpose and that they can be a part of.
That makes sense. I'm going to combine some of these questions. One, I'll throw out two. Maybe one of you can take one and the other can take the other. There's just a question around small traditional churches. Well, some of them may go under during this time. Is there a way that we can think about how to redeem those buildings for kingdom use? So that's one. And then another church is beginning to discern the creation of like a business, social entrepreneurial endeavor. What are some good first steps that you recommend for folks that are trying to start a business or a social enterprise in this climate?
Which one
you talk about the second one.
Okay. You go
the first question, this is a part of what Hugh and I want to do. This is a part of the vision of Free Market Church, because I'm not trying to get people to stop going to their church services or to their church buildings or whatever. I think that's fine. But if and when that does become a desire, whether of the pastor, leadership team, or a requirement because of the economy, we want to help people transition those spaces. We don't want it to just end up like a lot of Europe or the UK, where these spaces are now museums, and
our churches don't even look cool, so they can't even stay there on like terrible 70s and 80s.
But with a little architectural creativity. No, I want to say that, and not. We can't spend a lot of time on it, but yes, these buildings can be redeemed for so many purposes: for social spaces, for education, for co-working spaces, for creative spaces. And I see the staff being able to remain. I see a leadership model where, because here's the thing, man, most pastoral leaders have entrepreneurial hearts. They started something, not maybe of the old guard, but a lot of the new guys like have the ability to step out of that box if they're given permission and create a new vision that's still centered around making disciples. It's still centered around building the kingdom, but isn't necessarily centered around their 45-minute sermons and the 4 worship songs. It's more incarnational to the local geography. And so that is no question possible.
Lori, I think getting back to the second part, where do you start? How do you start limping into this? If you haven't read a book called Underground Church out of Tampa, be a great read, because Brian does a lot of good work about really the creativity of the church, like what you should be doing. It cannot flow from like the old senior pastor that goes, oh, let's like they did a coffee shop in Birmingham, let's try it. The true thing that will actually work has to be born of the Holy Spirit, who knows what he would start in this town. And I joke about, coming to this town, I could have planted a church as a church planter because that's what I've done my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
When I listened, the Holy Spirit went, no, coffee shop, event center, brunch cafe. So imagine if God is that creative in our town, what he would say in your town, but you probably will not be able to think it up as the leader. It has to come. So I would literally get your core leaders together, the ones that are most committed, and go, is there anything on your heart that you think that you would be, that just God has laid on your heart to do? And then go, how can we help you? And if someone comes up with an idea and everybody looks at each other and goes, yeah, that would be a fantastic idea. And then you looked at your church building and it was built in the 70s, and you might even go, well, let's scrape the building and sell the land, and then let's drop 240 into Lori's vision. That's how this thing, I think, will start to be born. But it has to be contextual to what your town would view as good news.
Yes.
So maybe start there.
Yeah. In prayer and listening to God's Spirit. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you all sharing your own stories and journeys about how you saw this. You have seen it in the past and are seeing this evolve. We want to invite those of you who are on the call who may be interested in planting at the intersection of MarketPlace mission to apply to participate in the upcoming cohort. You can fill out an application for that through the V3 Movements app. There is an app that's available on Amazon, Google Play, I think iTunes. You can access it that way, and then you can fill out your application. And also, we do have a Facebook community as well.
I do want to mention before we close out, and I know we're at our time, but Hugh, what would people gain by participating in this MarketPlace planting, and is it a good thing to consider in this current time?
Yeah, I mean, there is some philosophy of what church is, and so we get, what is ecclesial form? How do we begin to grow that? But it'll go from the basic gestation of what should the idea be in your city, all the way to how we form essentially what you would call a missionary basis for your church. So it's both business and mission together. And again, we're covering that pretty fast, so we're going to get you at least moving down the runway a little bit. And it seemed like about half the people were already in their business that went through it. So we were able to get a little bit further. There's quite a bit of just personal coaching to that. So depending on where you're at, our preference would be, though, for those that already are leaning into the business aspect, or maybe already have the business or just trying to figure out how to church it up, essentially, how to grow the ecosystem. So.
Great.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time.